No need to worry. No one sees anything in the world but maybe me on the little thing. So we're going to get into chapter 2, which I will forewarn you, this is one of my favorite chapters because it is considered a soapbox topic for me. I think that happens anytime that you have any kind of real relationship to the content. And when I think of this topic, honestly, the first few slides are not that exciting for me. They're just talking about like biology concepts, which this is not a biology class. I get how they do relate to this course, but let's put it this way. Aside from the, development process, the students that would need to take a course in biology are not taking this course. You know what I mean? Like our pre-nurses used to take this course, and there may be rumor that they're trying to get it back into that sequence, which I think is wonderful because it is the only course that we have here that does address lifespan, the full lifespan. And I can only imagine myself being a nurse and dealing with people of all different ages, and like this would be great foundation for that. So, but honestly, like I said, they would be the only ones who might be really interested in the heavy bio content. So I will not lie. I'm going to dumb it down and we're going to get through it quickly. And then we'll get to the good stuff, which is prenatal development. That's my soapbox there. So let's see how this technology is going to work. Okay. So I think if I remember right, this entire class is female. Not that this would be a bad activity if you were male, but if you are a female, and it also might still not be a great activity because I totally understand that not everyone chooses to have children. That is a choice and I respect that. Yes, I am a breeder. I had two, and they are sometimes they're always the love of my life, but sometimes they are the joy of my life, and sometimes they are the thorn in my side. But kids are awesome, but they're not for everyone, and that's totally okay. So this is what the textbook provided. This was not a me thing. Have you guys ever heard the words birth plan? Yeah, no. I think it happens more so when you get closer to the age where you might want to have children. And I honestly had not heard it even at those ages until I was pregnant. And then I started hearing this birth plan. It was my sister who was like very advanced when it came to having children than me. She had 2, 3, I think, before I had my first. So she was far ahead of me. She was the teacher, I was the student. And I will be honest, I totally looked up to her as you are a saint of birthing, because she had 3 boys that were all overdeveloped, like all almost 10 pounders, 0 drugs. And I'm like, I don't know that I could do that. But kudos to you. You figured out how to do that. And, awesome. And so she was kind of, when we talk about birth plans, it asks, imagine a friend is trying to decide what they want in their birth plan. Okay, safe. It's a friend. It's not you. But you could also, self-apply and think about you too. So your friend is doing, what advice would you give them about their choice? So things that they consider when writing a birth plan. So it's basically what your ideal birth situation would be. Okay, I will tell you, I'm glad I didn't write one because I would be so disappointed in both situations. But it's basically what your ideal birthing experience would be. Do you want anyone in the room? What do you want? If you do, who in the room? Do you want to try to have a natural childbirth? Do you want an epidural as soon as you're wheeled in? What are your choices? And then, oh my gosh, do you think there should be a recording of the birth? I'm just going to say a hard no on that one for myself, but I'm sure that there were people that might have it recorded and actually enjoy watching it. But I will tell you, quite frankly, I think I was about 12 maybe when I went up to my parents' room and the TV was just randomly on. No one was watching it, but on PBS, they were showing The Miracle of Birth. And I don't know how they got away with that full-on nudity and the full crowning experience, but I was scarred for life. That is why I probably did not hear about a birth plan until I was actually pregnant, because I was not going to have children. It scarred me so bad. It was so like, ooh, cringy, right? That's the word, right? I don't know. Horrifying. A little too real. Oh, it was so wrong for me to see that. I totally, we have like I think a 2-story house, and I booked down the stairs as fast as I could, screaming, I'm never having children. Like that was my impact.
We just need to show all like 12-year-old boys.
There you go. Hey guys, it's movie night. That would be my kids would love that, right? Because I have 2 boys. Hey boys, it's movie night. Yeah. Anyways, so let's talk about this, because it is, I know I'm making it so funny, but it really is something to think about, right? Because one of the biggest things that I feel about like prenatal development, how mom's mental state and how mom's like emotional state is huge when it comes to the outcome of the pregnancy, as well as the total birth experience. You guys probably remember from Psych 101, there's a strong, mind-body connection, and your mind is stronger than your body. I've heard the saying, totally different application. It was back when I used to, I don't know if I enjoyed running, but I ran. Not fast, but for very long period or distances. And if the mind is willing, the body will go. And that's pretty much how I feel that happens with this. And I think that's how my sister was able to have those babies without any kind of medication, because her mind was in a very relaxed state. She did the Bradley method, which is all about relaxed, natural birthing. I took a education class. I knew probably as much as the instructor, but it still made me feel better that I went to it. It made me feel even better that my husband went with me so that he knew what was going on, because I teach this stuff a lot. Although that's the crazy thing. And that's why I say I would be, very disappointed if I had a birth plan, because everything that I thought was going to happen did not happen the way I thought it would happen. So, but think about that. Would you want, I've heard good things about like, getting in the tub to help relieve pain. I also have heard that it kind of speeds labor up if you're kind of stalled, that sort of thing. But what would you want for your birth plan? Do you guys want to share anything? I know this could be kind of personal, but this is your friend's birth plan, not yours. So what are things that you might say to your friend? And it could be just stuff that you've heard. You don't actually have to be educated in it.
I mean, I would probably say like husband in the room, or like your mom or something like that. Like I feel
like someone you can trust.
Yeah.
Right. But also someone who's not going to judge you
Right.
if you start swearing uncontrollably or something like that. I didn't do that, but I heard someone birthing next to me, and because we got moved down to the recovery room slower than we should have, because the way Bronson is set up, they have all of the rooms that are birthing rooms kind of together. So once you're done, you move quickly, but we did not move that quickly. So I got to witness a probably natural birth. It was very loud from through the walls. So yeah. And so I guess for me, the biggest thing is I would think is what will make me calm? What will chill me out? As long as it's not impeding any kind of medical necessity that's going on, that is going to be probably what's best for the baby. So I told you guys, I would have been disappointed. I'll go with my first child because I actually got to go full term for that one. And I had gestational diabetes, which is not fun. And I controlled it so well by diet. And I never had any issues with insulin or anything like that. But they always say you're going to be induced if you don't deliver by your due date, just because one of the consequences is the baby can get really large. And they had me do a ultrasound 2 weeks before my due date. And, we hadn't had one since the 20 weeks. So we had no idea like what he was in terms of growth or anything like that. But they're like, oh, well, he's measuring about 4 pounds right now. Eat the ice cream. And so, of course, I'm like, okay, I can eat whatever I want now. And I did. And there was nothing that negative that came of that. But again, mother's state. And for me, being induced was the scariest thing because I don't know if you guys have heard, but it basically takes your body from a state where it's not ready and makes it ready. And so everything that could potentially happen normally, it's higher risk that all of that could happen, like, preterm labor and stuff like that. And I will tell you, I was deadly afraid of having to be induced. And I had every single night for that second week after the ultrasound, I had like fake labor. And the Thursday before his birth, which they did basically induce me on, is the day before his due date. It was so bad, I was swearing it was real. And we went into the hospital. It was that bad. And nope. So we ended up having breakfast at 6 a.m. because it was the middle of the night when we went in, of course. Because it would start at about 10 o'clock each night, like on the dot. That's why I say, as much as you can be calm and chill and not be worried about something, that is my ideal birth plan. Yeah. But then the cord went around his neck and he was losing oxygen. And I was trying to like do the more natural. I'm sitting on a ball and she goes, every time you're like going up and down, because that's what they tell you to do, like it's like the big gym balls bouncing on the ball, make it go. And she goes, every time you do that, I see a decel in his heart rate. And I'm like, let's go. And so they basically said, yes, you're induced, but it could be another 8 hours. After I'd been started the induction at 6 in the morning, it was about 9 o'clock at night, another 8 hours. I'm like, you know what? If every single time that's going to happen and it's going to cut down his oxygen, it's going to mess with his heart rate, C-section time. I said, this isn't about me. And that I think that is the shift that parents have, is when you shift from me-centered to baby-centered. And I'm very glad I made that decision, but it was, like I said, not at all what I thought it would be. So I guess how I look at the birth plan is it's awesome to have one, but also be ready to ditch it because it could change at any moment. And as a parent, they call it parental imperative. You always kind of put your child before yourself at that point. That's when you kind of know that I'm a mom now. So yeah, all that brainstorming to get to the boring stuff, chromosomes. So the reason why I talk about this and the reason why I see it's interesting, I do like their analogy that they've got here. So every human has 46 chromosomes, okay? So dad gives 23 in the sperm, mom gives 23 in her egg, and then it's kind of like a shuffling effect. And you don't necessarily know what 46 or what 23 you're going to get from dad and what 23 you're going to get from mom, but you end up with a total of 46 when the egg and the sperm combine. So whatever you get is what you get. And that really explains how you can, as I said, I can have two children that came from the same womb that are totally different. And it's because of things like this. Okay. So this is why I say it's okay. This does make sense. If I lighten it like this, then it makes sense. Otherwise, people don't really care. So here's a cool one. What do you guys think? So we're talking about the 23 chromosomes. So on those 20 or the 46 that ends up being the developing embryo, number 23 is going to be the set of sex chromosomes. All the rest are just autosomes, they call them. And then the sex chromosomes are that 23rd pair. So if dad is XY and mom is XX, that's just the letters they assign them, who would determine the sex of the child? This is on the quiz, and that's why I'm asking, because it's interesting.
Doesn't a hormone have to be released from the male to determine what happens?
That is correct, because his sperm can either be an X or a Y. Mom's egg will always be an X on that 23rd pair. Okay, so if dad is sad that he's got a princess squad instead of a football team, he's the one who's determining sex. So I don't know what to tell him. I've heard crazy things about timing of intercourse, but yeah, it's his deal. So sorry, sweetie. Then we've got genotype and phenotype. Oh, this is where I talk about my sister's kids again, because they're funny. My kids are like kind of boring. They're really a good morph of both of us. Her first two, they are like almost identical. Like their like characteristics are almost identical. Both dark hair, dark eyes. Okay, and so we're talking about the dominant recessive principle here. If you have a dominant, they say allele in this book. I've always said gene, but gene or allele, whichever one you want to call it. If you have a dominant, it is going to influence the other. I think, like, I got this, type of thing. Yeah. So obviously between my sister and her husband, who are both, my sister's kind of like exactly like me, hazel eyes, dark hair, and my brother-in-law is dark hair, dark eyes, which are both dominant genes. So you're thinking the chances of them having anything but brown hair, blue-eyed kids is really rare, right? Okay, 1 and 2, that is exactly what happened. The third one looks like the milkman stopped by because he has blonde hair and blue eyes. And that only can happen if both of them had a recessive gene. So as much as both the mom and dad are dark hair, dark eyes, then little boy comes out, blonde hair, blue eyes, and all babies have blue eyes for, the first whatever of their life, but he did not lose them, and they became like bright blue. Now my mom has, I don't know what's on his side of the family, but my mom has on her side of the family, my sister and my mom, so my mom is blonde hair, blue eyes. So it's very possible that she could have had those recessive genes. Now, I am really glad I did not have 3 children, because my luck, the third one would have been that, and my husband totally would have been what's going on, right? Because we joked about it, She didn't care anything except that it was a girl, and it was not a girl. It was boy number 3, and they were done. Yeah, that's so funny how people again, they have their family mapped out, like their birth plan, like this is what the perfect is. And I get it. Everyone wants a boy or a girl. That's their preference. I joke now. I have 2 boys. I thought that I wanted a girl. I wouldn't know what to do with a girl right now if it, showed up wrapped in a basket on my doorstep. No idea. My nieces, I'm like, what do I get them? I don't know. Girls are hard. I love them, but they seem hard to parent. Okay, so this is the one I was going to skip. So this kind of just gives you that whole demonstration of what we were talking about. They use A's instead of B's. This is something that's interesting. As the mom of 2 boys who are more likely to have color blindness than girls, and a husband who is colorblind, I have the strongest genes. That's what that means. I obviously either don't have a recessive gene for color blindness, or it's not in my at all there.
Said no.
Yeah, they said no. They said, I'm going to dominate, is what they said. But it's funny because my father-in-law is not colorblind. My mother-in-law is not colorblind, but both boys, not the girl, are colorblind. Crazy, huh? So we joke with my husband because he'll see like a purple something and he thinks it's blue. I love him to death, but that is a product of his color blindness. And the scariest thing is he's an electrician where red and green wires are scary. But he has figured out some sort of coping mechanism that works. Thank God. I'm glad that there are black and white wires and electrical too, but yeah. But that's an example of an inherited disorder. That's what that soapbox went into. I was just kidding. They say Huntington's disease, I say color blindness, right? The abnormal ones are where something happens during the, either the fertilization or the development. So for example, Down syndrome, there's three, I think it's trisomy 21. So there's three of the genes on the 21st chromosome, and that's what causes that problem. Turner syndrome, there's only one X, so it's usually impacts little girls, and they often are shorter stature and have a hard time, if at all, can have children. So those are often like sex-linked conditions too. So, okay, so that's, like I said, those are kind of like the things that I talk about in terms of keeping it light, keeping it high level on biology. The two are terms on this slide. So I explain behavioral genetics basically as a way to look at nature versus nurture. Because if you read the description, complex, because most traits are the results of many genes. And you also add into that environmental stuff too, because they talk about behavioral as well as psychological traits. And those two things are largely impacted by the environment. And then the polygenic inheritance is basically saying one characteristic has so many genes that can impact it. So it's really rare to have two, like even siblings that are identical, even twins that are identical, because there's so many things that go into these genes. So I can tell you those terms are on the quiz. And if you know the definition, you should be sufficed. Okay, now we're getting into the cool stuff. So the dizygotic and the monozygotic twins. Again, we're getting into the cool stuff. Okay, so there are, I want to say, let's see, 1, 2, I think there's 3 sets of twins in my kind of extended family. Yeah, both of my aunts and another family, I can't remember who the third was, but both of my aunts had twins. It's funny because there's a lot of reasons why we're seeing higher incidence of twins. One of the big ones for all of our ladies who are taking educational classes and might plan to establish themselves before they get started having kiddos. Not advanced maternal age, but the older you get, potentially the higher chance that you might have twins. I will tell you, I was that person that thought, oh, it would be so cool to have twins because I've always wanted 2 kids, right? Just knock them out at the same time. I'm like, this is gonna be awesome, right? And I thought it's possible. There's 2 in my family already. Let me be number 4, right? But that did not happen. And I will tell you, as I had my first one, I'm like, oh my goodness, I am so glad I didn't have twins. So yes, your expression, Aubrey, was 100% correct. I was just being silly. I was just being silly. I did have a student from last semester. She took my class during the summer, and right after the semester ended, she emailed me and said, I'm going to be a grandma. Not to 1, not to 2, 3. Her daughter's having triplets. I'm like, holy smokes. For those of you who are not tuning in and only see the slides, you should see the classroom reactions. It's fun. But I still remember when I walk into Meyer, and I don't know how old they are now, but it was when my kiddos were, I don't even know if I had kids, but 3 redheaded triplets. I'm like, how did this happen? Recessive genes, number 1, triplets, number 2. I'm like, this is just a crazy birth miracle. Yeah, because, everything we're talking about, that, I don't know, it's just rarity, but it's so cool. So, I mean, the fact that they're all doing well, because anytime you have more than 1 birth, one more baby, chances are it goes up a little. Oh, my sister-in-law had twins too. That's what it was. The one who doesn't talk to me anymore. But anyways, that'll be an off-camera moment. The dizygotic are fraternal twins. What that means is there are 2 eggs and 2 sperms. They are basically siblings that share a birth experience. And I gotta say, that must be pretty cool. Okay. Monozygotic twins are kind of like these rare miracles that happen. It's basically you have an egg it's fertilized, and then it miraculously splits, and you get a bonus baby. Yeah, so I can't imagine. I still remember, so back to, I said, oh, I would love to have twins. And then I had my first and I'm like, oh my, no, I don't. And then I remember, so it was not the appropriate reaction when my sister-in-law told us that she was pregnant with twins. I basically said, because I was so shocked that, that doesn't happen. But and she was the perfect candidate to have twins because she's so tall and she has such a big, like, torso. Like mine, I don't know where they would go. I'm so short and so, like, oh, I know. But she just, like, and she never looked like huge. You know what I mean? Because she's like about almost like 5'10". And so she's got a really long torso too. And I'm like, and they did not want to come out. They were like camping out. They had to induce her as opposed to her going early. And she, yeah, 38 weeks.
Twins?
Yeah.
That's phenomenal.
I know, exactly. I was so excited for her, and I was even more excited the fact that they were completely healthy. So that was super cool because that doesn't happen. Again, she of course, I got it. Yeah. Yep.
Dude, I've met, I was gonna say I've met a pair of each, but that
Uh-huh.
sounded really weird. Of like the twin,
Mhm.
it's so different. It is.
It is.
And cool.
I know. And even though, like,
Oh my
they
God,
say
that's so-
genetically they're more similar than siblings, but I still feel like there's a
Whoa,
connection.
the identical?
Yeah.
For sure.
Oh, yeah.
But it's
Yeah.
even more fascinating to me when the fraternal twins end up being two different genders as well.
Oh, yeah.
Like, how did that happen?
Exactly. Yeah, it's crazy. So I took a slide out that was about niche picking, which I totally believe in, but I took it out just because I'm like, I want to get into the good stuff. But it also explains like how, like, the way we think and the way we feel associates with what we choose to be involved in. Okay, so that's what niche picking is. And they liken it to part of behavioral genetics. See, here's the cool stuff. These are the kinds of slides that I put in because it's way more fun than just a bunch of slides. And so here's some twin pictures. So this is exactly like what the sister-in-law showed. We see these two amniotic sacs that have little babies in them. And I was like, no way. Yeah, the edited version, no way. So what is this? Oh, this is there is the slide I thought I took out. Okay. Niche picking, that's what I want you to take from that. So your genes can influence the environment that you choose to be in. Yeah. Okay, so if you guys remember from week 2, there is an assignment where I had you guys choose on the checklist what your traits are. Basically, the book had the same kind of idea. So dominant genes are like dark hair, dark eyes, curly hair, and then it had stuff with like earlobes and things like that. So we have 4 people here. I'm not gonna make you do this with a partner, but think of like the people in your family and think of like your mom and dad and think of how are you a product of their different genes. So for example, my mom, I said already, blonde hair, blue eyes. My dad had dark hair and hazel eyes. I am my dad's coloring or, hair and eye colors. And my 2 brothers, so my sister and I are both my dad's, and then my 2 brothers are both my mom's. So they ended up with blonde hair, blue eyes, especially when they were babies. You know how sometimes your hair is like really light when you're a baby and then it gets darker as you age. So they were like towheads when they were babies and really blue eyes. And my sister and I both had really dark hair and dark eyes. My sister started out with lighter hair. So she was kind of a mixture, but I guess I was solid what my dad had. So he must have had the dominant genes, which makes sense because blue eyes and blonde hair are recessive in of themselves. So this one, has everyone done it? So it's super easy on the Moodle page when you click on the activity, it's a choice activity. And all you have to do is click the check marks. And if you do that, I go in and I created an assignment and then I go in there and award your points for it. So it's a super easy one to do. All you have to do is on it, choose what you have. So if you have, like in the video, I'd be like, okay, check, I have dark hair, check, I have dimples, check, I have hazel eyes, check, I have this. And once you do that, it goes into the grade book and then you have the full credit for doing that. But I have to do it manually.
I was the opposite when I was born. I was born with
Yeah.
black hair.
Black hair. Okay, because your hair's lighter than that now.
But like my eyebrows are really black,
Yeah.
so-
So my niece was born with black hair and she had so much hair. So much hair. I had a lot of hair when I was born too. And I almost wonder if the darker hair, you're more likely to have more of it when you're first born. Because lots of babies that I've seen with dark hair have lots of hair. Both of my boys were like hardly anything. Yeah.
I will say that I was born with a lot of hair.
Were you, Jaylene?
Yes,
You guys remember Jaylene that was sitting here on the first day?
yes. I'm just sick today. I'm sorry. I
Yeah.
would have been there.
You're okay. Yeah, so you had dark hair and you had lots of it.
Yes. And
It is
then,
Because like I've seen so many like girl moms that want to put something in their baby's hair so bad and they're like putting in that like Velcro ponytail because they can't get no hair. That was
mhm.
like a lot of my nieces who are blonde and that would have been, well, my boys had kind of mid hair, I would say. But the dark hair babies, like they got full ponytails and it just, I don't know. I wonder if that's part of the dominant recessive too. Did you have dark hair when you were growing up?
I did.
Yeah, lots of it?
I'm not quite sure. I think so.
Okay.
It wasn't super dark, it was more hazel.
Okay.
And then my nieces are like blonde, and they came out bald.
Yeah,
They were the headband babies with the giant flowers.
exactly.
The longest time.
Yes, and all of my nieces are blonde except one, the one that had a ton of hair.
Mhm.
And she had a different dad, so that makes sense, right? We're talking genes that make sense. This is relatable to what we're doing as opposed to the biology stuff, right?
My niece has red hair and blue eyes.
Oh,
Mhm.
that's recessive too.
It's some of the rarest combination.
Uh-huh. Yeah.
Yeah, look at me and look at
Is
my
it like
niece.
fire red or is it more? Oh,
It was
wow.
like orange.
Okay. Okay.
And then now it's moved to like a strawberry blonde.
Mhm.
Yeah, and my other niece is blonde with brown eyes.
After we're done, guys, remind me to tell you the story of the cheating ref from soccer, because soccer always works its way into my classes, but I don't want to do it on the video. We'll wait for that. It's a funny story. Okay, I said we're getting to the good stuff. So there's go ahead.
Sorry, what's the question?
Oh, the cleft chin. Sorry, we got interrupted. So my son has this. It's basically you have a dimple on your chin. You might have one.
Oh, I think I have. one.
Yeah.
Wait, so what's wrong with it?
It's nothing wrong with it.
Yeah.
It's a recessive gene. And so it also is a widow's peak. He has both.
Yeah.
Grayson has both. So he's got like, it's a dimple in your chin.
Mhm.
I remember when he was born and all of the grandparents were like, oh, he has it. I did that too. When I was making the video, I have my earlobes attached. But when he was born, all the grandparents were like, oh, he has a cleft chin, like some old movie star that I had no idea who was. I recognized his name, but I'd never seen any of his movies or anything like that. But they were so excited that thought that was so cool. So I don't see no one has a widow's peak here, but his goes like this. Like it's just, he was such a cute baby. We should play baby picture day one. That'd be fun, wouldn't it? We all share baby pictures. Okay, so there's a objective on the study sheet that talks about the ratio and the location of fertilization. So this is a great visual. You see the largest cell in the human body, which is the egg cell, and the smallest cell in the human body, which is the sperm cell. And they are coming in on the fortress. There's a very thick wall that surrounds and protects the egg. And only that very first sperm, which they actually say have a sense of smell, is the one that fertilizes the egg. So once he's in, he's the winner, that's it.
What?
That's,
Why?
I have no idea.
That's like.
So,
why-
Now, so if you think about this, the body, so first of all, don't mean to scare y'all if you're having sex. But our bodies are meant for reproduction. There are crazy things that they do that you wouldn't think of in terms of,
Like pheromones and stuff.
oh yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
And so the body creates a habitable environment for that egg to develop and then eventually latch on. And I think it has something to do with the nutrients that are in the body for that. They can detect that, kind of like the pheromones. Like it's some crazy stuff.
Like the better shape that a man is in before you get pregnant, like up to a year beforehand, can legitimate, like, it's
Yeah.
crazy to me how much, like, he ultimately determines how your pregnancy is going to be.
Yeah. And I taught a human sexuality class, like several of them, several semesters back when I was a grad student. That was fun, mind you. But the detail that textbook went into on how our bodies are designed for reproduction was scary. Like things you wouldn't even think of.
Got any extra copies?
I think I have one in my office if you want to borrow it. If you want to borrow it.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's fascinating, but that's the whole thing is, so as much as that is true, there's only such a short window by which you can get pregnant. It's only a couple days.
Yeah.
So I will be honest, adolescent sex, you're rolling the dice because obviously the body is meant for that, but your cycle is so irregular and there's such a small window. Like teenage sex scares me, obviously, mostly because I have 2 teenage boys. But yeah, exactly. So once that penetration begins, cell division begins, and the outer wall basically becomes a thick fortress and nothing is getting in there. So
Except the tetragens.
teratogens can get through the cell wall, and that's the scary part. There's where my soapbox starts, teratogens. Yeah, I think it's Latin for monster maker. Isn't that crazy? I mean, that gives you an idea how bad it is, right? Yes.
Oh my God. I was wondering, is the whole pheromone research, is that backed by science? Is that like, I hear about it.
I do too, and I think when you, so the first, what do you call it? The first objective that I almost deleted off said, describe or discuss the evolutionary perspective and how it impacts development. That is where that would come in. And I left it on there because I know evolutionary sounds like a buzzword, but it's also very much, it's how we adapt to survive, right? So we can say, because a lot of people say creation versus evolution and stuff like that. That's not where I'm going. I'm just saying that we adapt to survive. You know what I mean? It only takes a couple times when you go, whoops, shouldn't have done that. And sometimes it's significant the very first time and you never do it again, right? That is evolution too, because you are adapting to the situation. You now have new knowledge that would change your future actions so that you don't do that. So I believe the pheromone has something to do with like more of when you look at the theories of attraction, the one that is like the physical, because it goes into like how we are attracted to people, and that kind of comes into that.
Okay.
Yeah. So I don't know what the science is behind it, but I think there must be some science behind it. Yeah. And let's see. Okay, so this is a slide that I always take fault with because 38 weeks, yes, I get that. But depending on when you start, every doctor that I've ever had, they always say 40 weeks. And I think it has to do with from the time the egg was released as opposed to when it was fertilized, because there's about a 2-week window there, and that makes sense. But always want to shoot for the max amount of time your doctor is either using 40 or 38 when it comes to your goal to get there. Because that fetal period is the last, as you can see there, and these are not evenly divided periods. The zygote, it's basically conception and implantation. And then when implantation ends, the embryo stage begins. And then you enter probably the most sensitive period of development. And if you look at the time frame there, the 3 to 8 weeks, I mean, even the most sensitive of pregnancy tests are maybe 4 weeks. And those are the ones that they call the early response ones. And they look for a different hormone than the actual hormone that would normally trigger a pregnancy test. But that 3 to 8 weeks is basically when all of the organ systems are forming. So the heart starts beating in about 5 weeks. So you can see how quickly things are happening. And it's gotta be at warp speed because you're talking about 2 cells that become a living, breathing human in the course of 38 weeks, which is crazy. Miracle, but crazy. Because it's just everything's happened so fast. And that trend happened or continues in infancy. When the baby is having that first year of life, there's so much development that's going on. And that's why I'm struggling with this textbook, because they try to combine infancy with early childhood, and I just don't agree with that. Because there's so, like, you have to respect infancy.
That is 2 different human beings.
I know. You're talking about one that, screams for what they need to one who communicates back to what they need.
Yeah.
Maybe not like
It's a
really
baby and
skilled.
it's
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. You're talking about one that lays there and you're talking one that runs.
Yeah.
It's so, yeah.
And you can draw versus ones that
I
like
know. Just drool. They're gonna eat the crayon. Yeah, so this is like the cognitive dissonance I've got going on in my head with this textbook. So, and that's why it's not like, usually I have everything ready before the class goes and everything's good. And I feel like I'm just spinning my wheels. So, yeah. Ding, guess what? We're getting into my slides after this one. Okay, so the first one, they call it the zygote stage or the germinal stage. The last textbook I used, I think the first textbook I used called it germinal. So I always say it could be either. But if you go zygote, embryo, fetus, you're basically talking about the name of the stage is what the baby is at that time. So zygote is a fertilized egg. Okay. And that can be fertilized naturally. It could be fertilized with assisted reproductive technology and then implanted. But the big thing to know in terms of that objective is when, where ratio. So the when is obviously when sperm and egg meet. It's usually shortly after ovulation because there really is about a 48-hour window. And the crazy thing is though, sperm have a lifespan probably of up to 72 hours. So you can see where it gets a little dicey here. So, and this, when you guys watch the video, well, I'm not sure if I put in the multiples or single, if they both mention it, but if there is residual sperm from a previous act of intercourse, oh, you're not, they could be just like waiting there, waiting for the egg to be released. And then you got a pregnancy. Yep.
That's good.
Yep. Faces. I love this chapter. It's so much fun. Yes.
In vitro,
Mhm.
how is that any different from the borderlining of eugenics?
So my understanding of eugenics is more selective,
Yes.
and like you're spinning sperm and you're trying to get a certain a baby that looks like a certain way.
Yeah.
No.
Or like
Yeah, so-
genetically like disease prevention and stuff like
Right,
that.
right. Now, that would be more of a, I would say, kind of softer version of eugenics than like the,
Is-
the cosmopolitan baby,
Yeah.
that sort of thing.
Yeah.
But I can see it for preventing diseases because there's a lot of people who opt not to have children because they do the pre-pregnancy testing and they find out that they are a carrier for this, that, and the other thing. And to be robbed of having kids and you really want them. And I totally get that, yes, you can adopt, but some people just really want that whole experience.
Like different too.
That's what I wonder
It has to
too.
be like,
I know.
get like like adoption and that is like so great.
It
But then at
is.
the same time, like, it's like completely different. Like you can't say that like, not that you're not gonna love them the same, but you can't say that there's like a different form of like
So
You birthing the child, like, you know what I'm saying?
I do. And that sounds really bad, but I've thought of that myself. Like, if I adopted, would I love the child the same way and I think the rationale behind that is attachment begins in the womb. Like, you are attached to this baby probably the first time you see them on the ultrasound, which might be 8 weeks. You might be attached, like I do remember there was a deer in the headlights look when we finally were successful to have a child, like to get pregnant. Like we were planning and we were trying, but still when it happened, like, holy crap, like I was still scared. But I truly believe that it begins in the womb. You know, I didn't talk to the baby so much, but like I said, even when it was those last few weeks when I would have that preterm labor, it was like it was a connection that happened. He would also have the hiccups about 3 a.m. almost every night. And like those are things that like silly, but it's part of that connection, feeling a baby grow inside you, it's a connection. You can't negate that. So that's why I said once I'd had one, could I do that? And I totally get that. But attachment is something because I mean that's dad's experience too. If you think about it, dad doesn't really get that true ability to attach to the baby until he or she's born. I remember, gosh, this is when I first started teaching, and I had a young dad that was in my class, and it was like one of the coolest things ever. He's like, so my girlfriend just had a baby and he's breastfed. So I feel so left out because like the baby seems super attached to her. And I said, well, breastfeeding is not necessary to make an attachment. I said, bottle feeding babies can be just as attached to their parents as can breastfed. And the thing that is, it's a sensitive feeding, right? It's you like snuggling with the baby as opposed to you providing a breast. You know what I'm saying? It's you snuggling, it's you like making eye contact, it's all of those things. So he told me, okay, I'm gonna take my shirt off and snuggle with the baby. That kangaroo care stuff, and that they do that right when the baby's born, and it's to kickstart attachment. And they don't, if mom's not available, so she got knocked out, had a C-section, then dad can do that too. And both options are super healthy for the baby. And here's another cool thing that our bodies do. So my second son was premature, and a lot of countries where they are more like developing and don't have the technology that we do, they will put the baby on mom's chest because the baby's system will get regulated by her system. Like, and I remember this, like when Gunnar was still on the monitors and you could see like what his heart rate was, you could see what his respiration was. And when they would put him on my chest, it was like baby chill. It basically took over all of my normal respiration, all of my normal heart rate. And it was so cool. So I agree. That's me personally thinking. Now, I could also say that probably someone who has adopted a child could also argue right against us. And I say more power to you. That's great because everyone's going to have their own. And this is nature versus nurture, right? This argument, as I said, it will come up over and over and over again in this textbook. So nature versus nurture is super cool, and it probably can be applied to everything. So yeah, good discussion, fun. So let's see. Yes, that's the zygote. And so it's fertilized usually in the fallopian tube. Okay. Because I think a lot of people think it makes sense that the egg implants in the uterus. So that's where fertilization would happen. Oh, those sperm, they're a little anxious. They are fast swimmers and they flow up that fallopian tube. And before it makes it down to the uterus, it's fertilized. And then that fertilized egg goes down into the uterus and finds its happy spot. And sometimes it might embed a little bit and then release and then really burrow in. If this is one of those crazy things, again, our bodies are so weird. And miraculous at the same time. But if that were to happen, sometimes women might have a little spotting during their, not like before their period would have happened or when their period should have happened. And they're like writing themselves off that they're not pregnant, but then they end up being pregnant because the egg just kind of found a happier spot. And then once that implantation is complete, that's when that embryonic stage starts. So this is my germinal phase. We need more darkness in here a little bit so you guys can see the pictures. So one, some of them are kind of computer generated. That one is the most uncomfortable transvaginal ultrasound that you will do, the one with the bladder and the baby. And the other one probably is, the other two are probably computer generated. The one might be for reals, but it would be more laboratory as opposed to in the body. It'd be really difficult to get that.
If men
picture.
got pregnant, like these technologies would be so much more non-invasive.
Right. So my first son, we had his first appointment at 12 weeks. So the baby was far enough along that they were able to just do the nice right on top of the abdomen type of ultrasound. The next one, I think we must have went maybe a week earlier or something.
No.
And it's a word that I'm not going to use on camera, but yeah, it was a funny name we called it. So cell division begins immediately after conception, and within 10 to 14 days, you have implantation complete. And then you move on to, oops, I got another one. Oh, here's their version, which I actually thought was really cool. And I left it in here because it takes you kind of day by day what's going on. And it really says that I'm right when I say that it happened, that fertilization happens in the fallopian tubes. So the ratio is there's billions of sperm cells, one egg, maybe two, if there's super fecundation. It's a fancy word they use on it's basically you overovulated on the National Geographic video. But within 48 hours, it's up to 4 cells. So it's 36 hours, 2 cells. Egg divides and splits for the first time. It just, like, it's a whirlwind. It happens so fast. You've got a zygote at 9 days. Or, I'm sorry, 4 to 5 days. I'm reading number 9. So it just kind of gives you an idea. And the reason why I say it's important to know that the fertilization does happen in the fallopian tube, that is why we have the instance of the, what do you call them, tubal pregnancies, which are really dangerous and need to be, like, unfortunately, if mom doesn't detect that's what's happened, she can lose her life too. So it's tubal pregnancy. So instead of the the zygote embedding into the wall of the uterus, you get stuck in the fallopian tubes. It's super dangerous.
What about ectopic or like?
That's kind of the same thing.
Oh,
Yeah.
okay.
A pregnancy outside of the uterus.
If it happens like one time though, like, is it more likely to happen like every other time that you try and?
That I don't know. I would hope not. Because unfortunately, there's usually like,
There's probably damage.
I was gonna say, there's usually scarring because unfortunately it has to be surgically removed because, or spontaneous
In
abortion.
some states now, are those women just left to die?
I don't know. I really don't know. Yeah, that's a crazy thing.
Sorry.
No, I have like, I remember when I was young and I had no children and I was very opinionated, and that good for everyone, right? But once I had babies, like, it kind of morphed how I think because I can't picture my world without that. But I'm not gonna do that for someone else.
Yeah.
That's my personal thought. Exactly. So yeah, it's one of those crazy things. This is a very good question because I am curious now. Okay, embryo. So we're in the second stage of prenatal development. The big word you want to take away from the slide, is it on the slide? If it's not, it's definitely on mine, is organogenesis. Okay, organogenesis basically means the beginning of all of the organ systems. So as I was saying, I think at about 5 weeks, the heart starts beating. The first parts, organs to develop this, so the baby follows two principles of development. Cephalocaudal and proximal distal. There's a slide coming up on this. But cephalocaudal means head downward. So the brain is one of the first things that develop. And the proximal distal means inside out, so internal. So the brain and the spinal cord are two of the very first things that are developing. When you watch the video, you'll see the cells kind of fold in on each other, and they talk about the coronal ridge. And that is what is eventually going to be the baby's spine and the brain. So that is why this is such a fragile period of development, because the brain and the spinal cord, your powerhouse for your body, are the first things that develop, and they develop when you don't even know you're pregnant. That's the crazy thing. And that's why I say anyone of childbearing years, whether you're planning to or not planning to, just be educated and know your body. If you are trying to have babies, then I highly recommend getting on the prenatal vitamins before you're pregnant, because what that does is it gives enough of the folic acid in your body to prevent about 40% of cases of spina bifida, which is a defect with the spinal cord, which again, as I just said, happens so early on in development. Yeah.
What was the word that you said when you needed to?
The coronal ridge, or
I don't know, you said you need to know this. Organogenesis.
oh, organogenesis.
Okay.
You need to know this, organogenesis. Saying it for the people at home, right? I'm gonna have fun with this semester. I just can tell. But I do love you guys here. That's fantastic. Like, I thought 4 would be weird, but it just makes it very conversational. So I'm good with that. We'll have to have food. Let's see. So, okay. College kids always want food. That's like, I showed my son the toilet paper. I'm like, you gotta read the toilet paper. There's 3 pieces involved, often. He goes, that's how they get people there. I said, you're darn right they do. So there was an objective that talks about the ectoderm, the mesoderm, and the endoderm. So the embryo gets kind of layered development. The outer layer, the ectoderm, becomes the hair, skin, and the nervous system. The mesoderm, muscles, bones, and circulatory. And the endoderm is the inner layer, which is your digestive and lungs. And the lungs are the very last thing to fully develop, which is scary because that is an essential part of your body. So some of the most essential develop early on, kind of like, again, that proximal distal, so inside out, the brain, spinal cord, heart are all developing very fast. And the finishing touches on the lungs don't happen because they kind of go all the way out to the extremities of your body. That is one of the last things. So 34, 35 weeks is when you generally get about full lung maturity. And then it's still kind of iffy. So when, that's why they have special care nurseries that have for babies that are just a little bit early, because being 38 weeks to 34 weeks, the biggest thing that's happening is the surfactant in the lungs. It basically makes it so the lungs can inflate, but don't like collapse on each other. It's sticky stuff that keeps them inflated. And that's like one of the last things that's happening. I'm having deja vu too, doing tests. They were tests, because what happens is when the lungs are fully developed, the baby puts like some sort of cell into the amniotic fluid, and they can test your amniotic fluid for lung development. And that's what I was doing right before my son was born. I had to do like daily amniotic tests. Yeah, I hadn't thought about that in a while. So these are those principles that I was talking about. The cephalocaudal, head downward, and the proximal distal, center outward. And you'll see those happening in infancy and childhood. It's just parts of the way that our body develops. I always joke. So, you know, the babies that have the giant heads, I had one of them. My oldest son, my husband's like, When I look back, he kind of looks like an alien baby. It's because his head was 95th percentile. The big head. And his body was only 5 percentile for length and 10 percentile for weight. So he did have a big head. He had a big brain, that sweet boy of mine. He had a big brain, but it's this principle of development, right? But again, you have to remember, they had me on a very, like, watch what you eat, and walking is natural insulin. So I would eat and then I would walk on the treadmill for a little bit, control those gestational diabetes. So good. So good that he was 4 pounds at 38 weeks. They're like, unleash the beast, eat what you want. And I did, but he was born at 5'12", so I didn't do good enough. Because at that point, you're so big, you don't want to eat. You don't. There's no room. I got no room. Do you imagine me having twins? Like if one and I could eat whatever I wanted and I couldn't eat? No, that wouldn't have been good. So those are the 2 patterns. Okay, so we're moving into the embryonic period. So we have another transvaginal ultrasound here where you have a view of the baby. Okay, so you can actually see that pattern of development happening. You can see that the head is more pronounced than the rest of the body, more developed than the rest of the body. And that is at 12 weeks. Okay, or I'm sorry, 8 weeks, 8 weeks, sorry. I'm jumping into the fetal period. My first ultrasound was at 12 weeks. That one is at 8 weeks. At 12 weeks, it's so crazy because you can't feel anything, but it looks like a jumping bean inside there, just bouncing everywhere. I'm like, that is so crazy. I can't feel anything, but ching, 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 ching. It was crazy. And the other one would be courtesy of a lab, because this is probably one where they're looking for the most well-defined embryos that they're going to place into the uterus or fallopian tubes, depending on which technique they're using. And this book does not cover that. And I think with the number of people who are postponing childbirth, it's an important topic to talk about because it might be something that you need to do. There's lots of different steps into those assisted reproductive techniques. And like I said, the goal is always the same. It's to have a baby. It's not to have a designer baby, although I'm sure there are people who might try that. I'm kind of, so she was saying eugenics, where they kind of spin the sperm and kind of get the selected sperm to fertilize egg, then do the implant. And sometimes I would say it's kind of for good, like if you're trying to, and I don't even know how, I mean, some people are so smart because I wouldn't be that smart, but to be able to detect which sperm cell might carry that condition, that's so crazy. That, I mean, medical advancements are pretty ridiculous.
We still have transvaginal.
Yes, they do. Exactly.
Like, can we please, like, research women? Like,
Yeah, exactly. Oh my gosh, I was watching Shark Tank last night, and this was a really cool thing. It's way too expensive because a lot of people choose to breastfeed because it's cheap.
Mhm.
Well, this, again, female researcher figured out how to freeze dry breast milk and have it reconstituted and have still all of the same nutrients and antibodies, all of the good things that you want. Because they were talking about how if you freeze it normally, it starts to lose a little bit of its nutritional kick.
Mhm.
Yeah. It was hilarious though, because it was one where Gwyneth Paltrow's on it and she goes, I was a milkmaid. I could have fed the whole neighborhood. And I just like, it's hilarious that she said that. She goes, but if they had that, I could have been freeze drying milk. And I'm just, oh my gosh, this is crazy. But you basically mix it with water and then it's kind of, it's back.
My poor oldest sister, she was just getting, like, she had her baby a
Mhm.
couple weeks after. It's been months later, my niece is probably 6 months old, but her best friend just had a baby. My sister started like lactating again and it
Oh.
freaked her out.
There's some pheromones, I bet. Yeah, that's crazy. But
Being around the newborn.
yeah, it is. So there we go. We're again talking about how our bodies like are designed in weird ways. Yeah. So one of the things that I always talk about and this tech doesn't really talk so much about the mother's experience, the trimester view, as opposed to the prenatal development. A lot of moms don't realize it, but just breastfeeding will burn 500 calories a day because what it's doing, your body's working overtime, obviously, but it's also kind of speeding up going back to pre-pregnancy shape. It creates contractions in your uterus because okay, let's all touch our nose. That's the size of your cervix before you get pregnant. And that is your cervix, and your right here is your uterus. And your fist uterus has to go back to that size, but it was big enough to hold a watermelon. So why do you still look pregnant after you had a baby? Because you still got a uterus the size of a watermelon. And breastfeeding makes that happen faster. It constricts, so kind of on the same token of being around the newborn, it constricts your uterus so that it basically flushes out faster. So it's crazy stuff.
So like, if you're like, because people like choose when they stop breastfeeding or whatever
Yeah.
like that sometimes. Like, does it like, where does all the milk just like go? Like, how does it just stop?
So it dries up, but initially, like you're gonna look like you're making adult films because there's so much engorgement that for a while, it's painful. And then, yeah, and then it slowly goes down. Now, if you were to breastfeed, it would be better because I think your body gets used to the ebb and flow of life. But if it's like thinking, I must feed, I must feed, I must feed, and there's no feeding happening, then it's just gonna be like on overaction and then fine. It'll take a while, but it will. And there are lots of leaking and discomfort and stuff like that. I've heard of women putting like cabbage leaves in their bra. I don't know if that's supposed to actually work. I don't know. That's an old wives' tale to like help dry up the milk. I don't know.
My sister just stopped because like
Yeah.
Lily and the niece was like biting them, and she's like, I'm done. I'm done. We're done. You're done. You're cut off.
So how long did she breastfeed?
I want to say maybe close to a year.
Okay.
Because I know Lillian was definitely walking before.
Okay.
a year.
Yeah.
So 13 verse.
Yeah. Right. Yeah. Because I mean, even once they figure out how like real food is,
It was trauma on her.
mhm,
So that,
I'm sure.
like, for a long time, I was in your same boat, like, I never had any kids, because like, that.
So here's another vision of the embryonic stage. You can see from 28 weeks or days to 56 days, the development is crazy. And it very much does illustrate that cephalocaudal pattern of development where it's like my son, the alien baby, his big brain is going on right there. Okay, here's another one. I love, like, look at the development in those fingers. Like they're like cartoon to almost normal. You know what I mean? And the toes, and this is a great example of that cephalocaudal pattern of development too, because at the same time, as much as those toes are starting to look like little baby toes, the fingers are more developed. So crazy stuff. Okay, fetal development. So this is, I do like a little bit more of this slide than mine because every textbook that I've taught from in the past basically said all the unfinished stuff happens during the fetal period. And I'm like, yeah, but what then? Right? So this one gives a lot more detail, like bodily systems begin to function. Yes, they practice swallowing and breathing in utero. That was one of the things that they were looking for at my 38-week ultrasound. And they look, you can see that he's practicing breathing. He was like swallowing the amniotic fluid and trying to like breathe and stuff like that. And yes, there are excreting, but it's just amniotic fluid, so it's not like gross, but it sounds gross. The brain, lots of brain development. And then week 9 is when you start. So here's a crazy thing. So up until week 9, all genitalia is identical. That's crazy, isn't it? And at week 9, you start to have the ovaries and the testes start to differentiate. And then that's going to influence the development of the external genitalia. Easy stuff. Pregnancy is so amazing. I really believe it. So here's again, a couple things that are going on. Circulatory system. Right around 16 weeks, you start to feel movements. A lot of times it begins to feel like gas. It feels like there's bubbles that are like, it's really light. And then as they gain a little bit of more sizability, then you can kind of really feel it. The vernix that they talk about in week 20, this is a protective substance that protects against heat loss when they're born. And as they get further on, there's a little, it starts to be less of it because there's more body fat. But it's basically protecting for, and they have changed the age of viability. That is awesome. It's always been 24 weeks. And so the 22 to 28, I think really more accurately represents what the chance of the baby surviving when it's born that early. Because my son was born at 33 weeks. And at that point, I only knew in my head the 24. But since then, I've met and kind of networked with so many moms of preemies that they had babies that were much younger than him gestationally. And then also younger than what they said in the textbook should be the age of viability. And to be fair, the age of viability, they say at this point, the baby has a 50% chance of survival. So it's not like you're out of the woods by any means, but it kind of gives you an idea of that. But it has changed. And 22 weeks and beyond, their senses are active. Some crazy things. If you want to play with the belly, you can put a cold baking dish on it and they will get away from it. You can talk, like I remember I had a 10-20 class, and every time that I would go in there and start teaching, I would start getting elbowed because he could hear me. And he's probably trying to sleep, but I just remember feeling that. And I also remember I had a friend who was pregnant and her husband raced motocross at Redbud. And she would stand, and I don't know if you guys ever been there, but she would stand like at the starting gate, and it is insanely loud. And so she would do that while she was pregnant. So when the baby was born, she would take her also to the races. And that kid, zero fear whatsoever, did not faze her at all that these bikes are going crazy. She's just like, chill. So yes, I believe that they can remember, or actually sense, and it's not always that they remember voices. I think they're familiar to them. And if it's so they've actually done studies where they would have, say, a mom, say dad's holding the baby, a mom, and then another female, and they will turn their attention towards mom's voice. Yeah, it's crazy. Babies are so amazing.
I have like a little weird thing. My mom was obsessed with Metallica when I was in womb. Obsessed with Metallica, constantly listening. So like even now, if I'm having like a really rough day, and I think it was because it was so soothing to her. Like when I put it on, it's like I could take a nap. And it's really peculiar to
Yeah,
take
yeah.
a nap to enter the Sandman.
Exactly.
And so cool.
Yeah, so that little sentence right there is basically what the other text would involve, refining and including of all the primitive organ systems. There's so much more that happens, and I especially found offense to that after I had a baby at 33 weeks. So I'm like, there's so much should be happening inside right now, not outside. And the nurses told me that basically a day in is like 2 out. So if you're born preterm, it might take double the time for like development and like to go home. He did go home before his due date, but it was a close one. Okay, so we don't have to do this with a classmate per se, but what do you guys think, based on my very animated coverage of the zygote, embryo, and fetus stage, which one do you think is most important? Keep in mind, there's no right or wrong answer. That's what I think too. I can also say, because I have a chart that I used in my child psych class that I maybe should throw in this slideshow too. I think it's from Purdue University, and they have like a table and they show you like what is happening in each stage and what might be most impacted by teratogens. And that's crazy. But some things are actually more impacted towards the end, but it's not much in comparison to the embryonic stage.
What are teratogens?
Those are anything that can cause abnormal prenatal development. So it could be as simple as things that we do as non-pregnant women that would be very bad to do if you're pregnant. So caffeine, like I said. I haven't had any caffeine and like, oh, although that might, and I don't think, huh? Oh, hell no.
No, I'm sorry, yeah. I was like clicking it together, and
Yeah.
like, the only time you're going without caffeine,
No,
what's going
no.
on?
This is part of my detox. Sorry, that was a funny reaction. Yeah, as I have a 16 and a 19-year-old, am I gonna try to have no, I'd be starting way over. I don't want grandbabies yet, but yeah, I'm more to that stage than the other stage. But I do love babies. I just don't need another one right now. But yes, I agree. The embryonic stage and we're. Do you see how she preclumped me?
Sorry, it's squirrels all the time.
Oh, teratogen.
Yes.
Yes. So teratogen is anything that can cause abnormal prenatal development. So all the advice they tell you, don't do this, don't do this, don't do this, those are teratogens. So smoking, drinking, illegal drugs, all of those things are teratogens.
Like air.
Oh, I know.
Insane.
I know. Lunch meat, right?
That's what
Yeah.
like processed meats.
Processed meats can have the salmonella type stuff, and it can cause really bad, or listeria can cause really bad, potentially fatal to the baby.
Yeah.
Yeah, raw fish, all the things. Hot tubs, aspirin, Tylenol.
Oh.
So
It's crazy.
this is not a political thing. I promise you, God, it's not. So the other day I heard that the RFK guy is trying to say that autism might happen, or I think it's autism, might happen because of woman takes Tylenol during pregnancy. And it is a class C teratogen, which that's not good. So I'm like, it's nothing political. It's just, I knew that. And a lot of people don't know that. Right.
Okay, so when the baby's just born and they have to take all of the shots and stuff,
Mhm.
I've heard that that can cause like autism and things like that.
I honestly don't know. There are so many different things, and they're usually something I think that happens during pregnancy, but I really don't know.
Well, that's where like the holistic approach, and then like there's so many things with that too. Is like
Yeah,
what like
right.
so many different.
I don't
things
think
with
that there's a lot, like when we talk about the theories of development, that eclectic approach where you take like goods from different theories and you kind of come up with your own. I feel that's how we should approach this. Like there's not a universal right answer to any of it. And if anything would indicate that, it's the nature versus nurture controversy, because there's just so many things you can't control. You can't control your genes, and you can't control always your environment.
There's just so many like outside variables.
Yeah, exactly. You can raise this wonderful child and you can send them to daycare. And at 4 years old, he's introduced to the F-bomb and you did not do this. And then he repeats it in kindergarten. So I guess he was 5, not 4, but yeah, that's really happened. And I brought it to because he's like, it was this kid. And I talked to the daycare lady and I'm like, he's never heard that word before. And I do take a little bit of offense to the fact that he heard it here. And she tried to, again, nature versus nurture. He's got a bad child. He's got a bad home life. And I'm like, I'm sorry, but my child does not. And that is what he heard for the first time here. I'm not perfect by any means. I am not saying that I'm perfect. I often very much question my parenting because I let him just kind of roam freely in our like house. And I'm like, I feel like I should be doing something, but I was letting him explore and it actually was increasing his confidence and his cognitive development. But I was very much thinking, should I hover? Should I hover? No, you should not. You should let them try to exercise all their body parts. That's why that tummy time is important. Every body part in like the whole back of your body gets strengthened with that. Yeah. So I would agree, embryo is very important. Although I could also say zygote seems super important too, because that is where a lot of people, they have a heavy period, but they actually had a miscarriage and they don't even know it. You know what I mean? So you could say, like, if you did something during that was so detrimental to the baby, it could have that happen. Fetus, we could also argue too, because all of those body systems are refining. And the brain, I think, is like going on warp speed. So that could be most impacted during that time. Yeah. So that's why there's no right or wrong answer. Okay, here we go. Teratogens. Drugs, diseases, environmental hazards that cause abnormal development. And like I said, they can be stuff that normal people, unpregnant women can engage in with no ill effects, right? I mean, we live in a state where I think that I do pass a weed field on the way in, but every time I go by it, I think, is there like chronic user around here? Which I'm not judging, it's legal. Go be yourself, whatever. But I think I did see hemp growing today because it's on a Dutch settlement because the crops look dead. And I imagine
There is.
Okay.
There's a huge one.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you for the validation because the crops look dead. And I'm like, I imagine it's like soybeans, they dry it so that we can harvest
One of
it.
my friends lives out there in that settlement and I'm like,
It
it's
reeks.
so bad.
It's so bad. And like my youngest is so sensitive to the smell of it. Like we have this ritual. So we drive as far as we can and then we open all the windows and air out. Yeah. Here's a funny story. You guys will hear funny stories about my kids since we're already talking about that soapbox topic. I remember we went to Dollar Tree. So it's the one in Kalamazoo. And I'm talking about correlation here. It is next to the workout place and then also the plasma center. It's in between the two. And so we're going in. There's some interesting people when you go to the parking lot. That's all I'm saying. And I park way far out so my car don't get hit. But we walk in. My son is very young and apparently it must have been not the good stuff. He goes, Mom, I smell a skunk. Loud as can be. And I'm just like, ah. And that is karma. Do you know why? Because when I was little, I said, I want my dead bear. And I was just saying red, but it sounded like dead. And I said it really loud to my parents when I was at a grocery store. So.
Okay. Oh my God.
Kids will say the damnedest things.
My niece couldn't pronounce Teddy, her cat Teddy, and you know what she was saying, and I was like, no, Lillian, just Teddy.
Okay, so as I was saying, things that we can, as non-pregnant women, engage in, some in moderation, some maybe more than moderation, alcohol, aspirin, caffeine, nicotine, all of these can impact the baby's development. And they've linked some of them to the fetal alcohol spectrum disorder. Obviously alcohol, but here's a funny story. I was talking to my husband about the whole, the RFK thing. And I said, it's a class C teratogen. And I know that because I've been teaching this for eons of years. but I remember when we used to talk about smoking and the consequences. And if you look at the consequences, it's smaller brain development, it's lower birth weight, it's behavioral issues. I would always say to my class, I said, it's not been researched, but this really sounds like ADHD to me. And then shortly thereafter, that came out. So that's another one that goes with that. Because a lot of people, like, I can remember because when you think of low birth weight and not so much birth defects or miscarriage, but I remember it was a kind of one of those info, like PSA type of commercials. And it was a stork carrying a sign, and they were like, I think he was smoking, and he said, it's just a smaller baby or something. It was really bad. It was really bad, but it was to kind of get your idea that like, again, cognitive dissonance, that you should not be smoking when you're pregnant and making light of that in that way. But it was like, I'm going to see if I can find that commercial because everything's on YouTube, right? But it was weird. So diseases obviously can be considered teratogens because whatever happens to mom does impact baby. The medication that she takes may help her, but it also can harm baby. So I always say treat pregnancy as a medical condition, that you disclose it anytime that you're in a doctor because it might shape the treatment that you get. And then the environmental hazards, the PCBs, the x-rays, the lead. That's why if you guys ever go to get x-rays, they're always very like, is there any chance that you could be pregnant? Otherwise, you're wearing the lead vest. We're not doing any x-rays, that sort of thing. Hot tubs, hot baths can actually even impact cell division. So lots of different things.
What about microplastics? Have you found
Oh gosh. I'm sure that there's something to be found with it. I just haven't heard it yet. And it didn't make it to the textbook yet, but I would not be surprised.
There's been microplastics now found in human semen and my body.
That is crazy.
And,
Okay. So there's a question so all of these teratogens have different ways that they impact the development of the baby. Some are bad enough that they can go like all three ways, like through in the birth canal during birth, through the placenta, and actually attack. And that's how the low birth weight of smoking. It's because it constricts the blood vessels in the placenta. So basically, it's a starvation thing. So all of the nutrients can't get to the baby. So when you talk about, so that's one of the ways that they can impact. And I'm trying to remember, there was one other one, but it doesn't matter, obviously, if the teratogen is legal or not. It doesn't matter like how much of it.
Like, just because marijuana can help your nausea and like some other symptoms that you have, like, does not mean that it is actually helping.
Right, right.
It's like.
Well, and I even like cultural impacts on this, like a lot of European countries, like wine is so different than like, it's not alcohol so much there. It's just kind of a cultural thing. And for them to have a glass of wine when they're pregnant is not such a big deal. And I'm like, you're playing Russian roulette. You know, that's the school I go to, because I look at it as that's a chance of fetal alcohol syndrome. So it's so weird how different cultures look at things. And I would be very interested to see like what their FAS rates are compared to ours per se, just having the different cultural view maybe. So lots of cool stuff out there. So these were some of them. But honestly, I'm going to put in like my laundry list of so I don't have in here, I'm gonna have to update this one. But on my slides, I had a lot more coverage on the different disorders, like based on cell division and stuff like that. And then also on the teratogens. There's like not as much coverage here. And a lot of I linked to the March of Dimes website that covers that unit because that's one of the foremost research institutions with prenatal health. And that's, if you ever want more info, you can go there. Okay, so how I usually talk about different diagnostics and treatments are from what is least invasive to the baby. And obviously anything that's done before pregnancy would be that. So you can do pre-pregnancy testing to see if you're a carrier for any of these conditions that might show up in development. You could also do the genetic counseling. You can do like your first visit, if you did it before you're pregnant, might actually be very beneficial because you get like a book of your health history that you have to fill out. And it's a really good way for like the doctors to look for any risk factors that might come up during your prenatal treatment. So when you look at the value of prenatal treatment, it's every, depending on where you are in your pregnancy, at first it's kind of like monthly, and then it starts to go to every 2 weeks, and then it goes to every week, the farther along that you get. But if you're higher risk, that's going to change too. But the goal is to just make sure, status check, where is the baby right now? Are there any issues that are going on? You will do like a urine test every time you go in. They'll measure your belly, like how the baby's growing. It's all designed to see, as much as they can, is there anything that we can like treat or prevent or even just recognize that might be a condition. So all of that goes into that. But ultrasound, it looks very harmless, but it's high frequency sound waves that we obviously can't hear, but internally the baby can hear. And if you watch ultrasounds, sometimes you'll see the baby kind of repelled to the other side of the abdomen because of those high frequency sound waves. Amniocentesis to me is probably most invasive to baby. Also to mom, the other one the chorionic villus sampling might be more invasive to mom because it uses that special camera.
So
but
special.
Because it actually, I'd say it's worse than amnio, because in amnio, you're kind of big enough that they don't have to use that special camera. They can just use that ultrasound transducer, but they're basically putting a giant needle through your belly and they're removing amniotic fluid to see either where the baby is developmentally or if he has any conditions. And I always say, if you know you're going to keep the baby and there's no reason why that would change you, you just want to know, roll your dice and let it be. Because the other thing is that, and this is why they wanted me to do that, and I would not do it, because it goes through your uterus, which is a muscle, and it's very unlikely, but it could basically put onset contractions on. If the baby is nowhere doing baking, I don't want to mess with that. And especially seeing my water broke at 24 weeks, 25 weeks. There was no way. I'm like, it's already leaking. I don't need to like encourage it by giving it a little shot through the uterus. But I was very adamant I didn't want that. I'm like, I'll figure out how to do it elsewise. And we did, but the CVS, it's done so early on so that if someone were going to make decisions, they could, but they use the special camera and then they do the same thing as the amniotic. So it's equally invasive, like double invasive to mom. And so the non-invasive prenatal testing, like I said, is before pregnancy. So obviously it's not damaging or hurting the baby. And then the crazy thing is they can detect like spina bifida. They can do in surgery while the baby is still in utero. On one of the documentaries that I have for either this class or Child Sight, they show surgery being performed in utero, which is so crazy. So crazy. But the baby had its issues with the spinal cord repaired before he was born. Like, modern medicine is crazy. It's really amazing to only be that smart, right?
Isn't there like now just being released like a male contraception that has like no side effects or something like that?
That would be awesome because, like they're fertile every day. You know what I mean? Whereas women are only, they're working on it all the time, but it's only like a short window of time. So it's much easier to prevent that.
You also take some of the responsibility.
Yeah, exactly, exactly. Yeah, so.
I will look into it. So in a response to the toxic.
And that's a good place to stop.
Instead of.
I will create a video on the last few slides or create some fun videos to share with the class. But we are real close to when I would let you out anyways. So I always say in the 2-hour classes, I'm gonna go ahead and stop recording, but I'm gonna keep talking. No, you're good.